As most of you will know, that I'm Michael Lutzman, one of the managing directors of the Opinion Wine Club, and I'll introduce the other two in just a moment. Where are we? 4 minutes past. I'll give them 1 more minute, Kim Chen, and then I'll get started. And you've already got the recording going. And I don't think there's any way of monitoring that other meeting because it hasn't started, right? Okay. All right. And so welcome to another the Masters Case virtual tasting. One of the perks of being in this program is that you get to share the wines with the Master of Wine. Today it's Louise Wilson is going to be doing the Groote Post for us. And then we'll have Jacky on a little later to do Ramilo. We typically only do one at a time, Nick, but we're trying to catch up because of some shipping delays that happened because of COVID. So that's why there are two this time. We are delighted to have Mr. Nick Pentz from Groote Post with us today. And he's going to talk with Louise about these 3 wines that you've all received. That's one of the reasons this got delayed. We were waiting for everybody in the country to get them. And each province gets them at a different time. So we needed to make that work. So without further ado, why don't we get started? Louise, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us from Niagara, Ontario. Nick is in South Africa, whose power has now gone off, so he's using torches to light himself up there. We really appreciate it. They do rolling blackouts in South Africa to save power, so he's a victim to that. So please go ahead, Louise. You are currently what do you call it? Muted. Yes. There you go. There.
It's not like me to be that quiet, is it?
No, that's right. That's right. I saw you nodding.
I was
Yes.
talking along.
Why does Michael keep talking?
That's right. Okay.
That's
Well,
right.
thank you, Michael, for the introduction. And it is such an honor to be here with Nick Pentz. Nick, it's wonderful to see you again. I know we saw each other at Provine last year, and wonderful to have you on today. We know that it's late for you where you are. It's 10 p.m. there, isn't it?
10 p.m. Yeah. That's
10
all good.
p.m. on Saturday night. So we appreciate you making the time to meet with our members. I know that we're all really excited to taste these wonderful wines that we've selected for the Masters Case for Cellar 291. So maybe we'll start first with a little bit of background about Groote Post. I know that last year you celebrated a milestone of your family on the farm. It was 50 years on the Groote Post farm last year. Is that right?
Yes, Louise. Good afternoon, everybody, or should I say good evening? The sun only set here about an hour and a half ago. So we're in midsummer. I'm with the family up the coast from our farm, Groote Post, just up the coast in a small town of Langebaan. So it's a wonderful seawater lagoon here where we are. Lots of good seafood to enjoy it, of course, with Groote Post Rosé and Chenin Blanc and all our lovely white wines. Yes, Louise, 50 years ago, my dad and grandfather bought Groote Post up in Darling, which is about an hour outside Cape Town. We came from a dairy farming background. I was a 4th generation dairy farmer. We used to deliver milk door to door. We had a dairies in Cape Town, in the Cape Town area. And then later on, we moved the dairies out to Darling when my dad and grandfather bought Groote Post in 1972. And yeah, so initially Groote Post was a dairy farm, but later on, when South Africa became a democracy in '94, previously South Africa had sanctions against us, so grape growing and winemaking was quite limited, and you had to have a quota or a so-called license to produce wine and grapes. But as soon as we became a democracy, the world markets went open for South African wines. And we saw our way clear up in Darling on the West Coast, which is a magnificent area, especially for growing world-class white wines, to start planting vines in the early 90s. Initially, the idea wasn't to actually make our own wine. It was actually literally just to produce grapes and sell the grapes on to other wineries. And but it was very soon that we saw the potential of our area for really fine. Well, we were producing top quality grapes. They were very much in demand those early first years that we got going. And it was in '98 that we had an experimental batch of our wine made by a fellow winemaker down the road. And that Sauvignon Blanc actually turned out really, really well. And that paved the way for us just to build, to actually renovate old fortification building on the property, to house our cellar that we got going. 1999 was our first vintage. So yeah, it was really early days for us. Never forget that first year, that 50 tons of grapes coming in. We've grown considerably, well, more than 10 times since then, since those early days. But it was a very special day, those first grapes rolling in, and turning them into wine, not milk. I must say, a lot more exciting industry, really, to be producing wine.
Oh, that's wonderful. That early success with your Sauvignon Blanc really got you excited, hey? And onwards from there. So you're 3 generations of your family now working at Groote Post, your father and your son. And how?
Yes, really special to have my son Peter joined us actually literally like a month before the pandemic hit us, and it was pretty good because we had, our government had a total ban on alcohol for 5 months, on and off throughout the sort of 18 months of the pandemic. So he helped us a lot with online marketing and sales and so on. And it was great, doing business with a premium as well, obviously, that you had channels to your members that were still open. Then my father, he's a stockman of note. He was a dairy farmer, incredibly well-known dairy farmer. He pioneered the importation of cattle semen to South Africa, out of America, and subsequently later from Canada. And he was very progressive dairy farmer. He was Farmer of the Year in South Africa in 1998 for his dairy farming. And he continues his love, no longer dairy cattle on the farm, but we do have Angus, red and black Angus. And he continues his passion for cattle with the Angus beef cattle. And once again, also importing semen and genetics from the States and especially Canada. In fact, quite a bit of it's coming in from Saskatchewan and Alberta. In fact, I was visiting on a wine trip in 2020. I went to visit one of our suppliers, or one of the top Angus herds in Bashaw in Alberta, which was really, really great to go up that way. So we've kept our roots in stockmanship, in cattle. The farm is 3,000 hectares, so really, really big, 9,000 acres. But essentially, the property's got very, very different, very varying soil types. So we kind of farm it according to soil types. So up in the hills, right at the top of the property, we've got beautiful clay soils, which are ideally suited to the growing of quality premium wine grapes. So that's where most of the vineyards are. And then you come lower down, there's like a band of soil that's more sort of sandier, more gravel type of soils. That's where we grow our crops. We do wheat and canola and feed crops for our livestock. And then even lower down in the property, more sandier soils, we run antelope and we run sheep and beef. So we utilize all different soil types on the property. But the main focus is really, the production of really good quality wine grapes for making wine. We've got 126 hectares planted to date. As I said, our first planting started in '93. So those first vineyards are starting to get pretty old now. So we actually in the process of a really new planting program. Yeah, so my dad's still involved, not so much on the wine side, although the Old Man's Blend, of course, is named after him. So he has special inputs today with our winemaker, Lucas. My dad always gives the final nod on the blend. And yeah, then I've obviously, my son, Peter, is bringing a real like sort of energy and youthfulness and injection of sort of modern technology to the business. And so yeah, really special to have my dad around still. He's in his late 70s, still coming out to the farm most days. He's still healthy. So yeah, some good fun with 3 generations.
Very special. Thank you for sharing that with us, Nick. I think we should start in with some wine tasting here. How about you? So our master's case for cellar 291, we have 3 wines. And the wonderful thing about the master's case is really getting to highlight a picture of the winery. So it's really a snapshot of your whole portfolio that we have on offer right now. We've got the Chenin Blanc, we've got the Pinot Noir limited release rosé, and we've got the Cinsault to taste today. So I believe you have the Chenin with you, and maybe we should start with that one. And Michael, you've got it in your glass. I have tasted the next vintage for the cellar that we're in right now, but I don't have the 21 with me. So maybe I can ask you to speak to the 21, and then I'll add in my comments about the next vintage, the 22.
Are we starting with which wine then?
The Chenin Blanc?
With the Chenin Blanc.
Okay, great, yeah. Yeah, Chenin out of South Africa is always really good. It makes up, I mean, in the pre-democracy days, it made up a huge portion of plantings in South Africa. It might have been about 25% of vineyard standings in South Africa in the early 90s. And still today, there's a lot of Chenin Blanc in South Africa. I think our climate is well suited to the varietal. South Africa probably produces just pretty much the same as what France does, maybe even a little bit more. An incredibly versatile grape. It's you can make different styles of wine, from dry to sweeter. You can even make really good sparkling wine from it. It was a very popular grape in the days, in the sort of sanctioned days in South Africa, of course, because it generally can give quite a good yield. In those days, quite a bit of it used to go for distilling purposes, for making brandy and so on. But oh, we have a good following for Chenin. We get good production on the vines. We essentially get probably around about 12 tons a hectare. It's one of the earlier varietals for us to pick. Sort of like we start off with a few blocks of Sauvignon Blanc, and then the Chenin slips in between somewhere. So really, bring it down to the cellar. It's all about sort of try to pick it early in the morning to try and obviously I think the cooler the better is the idea. Get it down to the cellar. We've got quite a vigorous sorting table to take out green berries or any bit of rot there might be, or leaves. Then through the crusher, destemmer crusher, and then let the juice do the work. Really, I think that's really what it's about, Louise. So we straight into stainless steel, settling, inoculation, and a 2-week ferment, sort of at around about 14 degrees. And yeah, it's really quite a straightforward sort of winemaking process, but straightforward, but not such a straightforward wine. I think it's a lovely drink. Typically, you know, you get your pear, guava, sort of apple flavors coming through on Chenin. Really summery type of wine. And yet it's got a bit of fullness to it. And just pairs incredibly well with yeah, I mean, there's so many things. I mean, up the coast where we are at the moment, having a bit of yellowtail the other day, which is a lovely lionfish. You know, in the pan with a bit of butter. It's quite a, yeah. I mean, yellowtail's quite a rich fish. I think it does well with quite rich dishes. You can go with pasta, risotto. Yeah, just lovely.
Well, I can tell you, Nick, that I had some in my glass, and somehow the glass got empty. I had to refill it. So,
Okay.
So another nice thing about Chenin Blanc is the natural acidity, which makes it a really refreshing wine. So to me, this wine is all about the fruit. It's refreshing. You mentioned versatile. I find that all three of the wines that we're tasting today are quite versatile in the fact that absolutely lovely on their own, but also great food wines. So I think there's a lot that you can do with these wines. So I agree with you on the seafood call or shellfish. I think that would be absolutely brilliant with the Chenin. So a nice crisp dry wine. All three wines that we're tasting today have a dry finish. So lots of fruit, but a nice dry, crisp, clean finish. So it's a very enjoyable wine. So with the 2022, which is on offer right now in our current cellar, I think there's maybe 10 days left of our current cellar. My notes for the 2022, it was a lot about that green apple again, which is a hallmark for the grape variety, and citrus and melon. And of course, I noticed the refreshing acidity. So Chenin Blanc, I mean, I think most of the members have probably heard of it, but it's not as well known maybe as Sauvignon Blanc. I would consider Chenin Blanc maybe an alternative to Pinot Gris or Pinot Grigio, maybe Albarino or unoaked Chardonnay. So just nice, crisp, refreshing, fruity wines. So a lovely wine there.
Thank you very much. I think it's a South African Pinot Gris, probably. Yeah.
South African, and it is the most planted grape variety in South Africa, is it not?
Yes, at one stage, as I said, it's up to about 25% of plantings in South Africa.
Yeah.
I think currently it's quite a little bit less, probably about 17 or so.
Yeah,
but
still the leader. Yeah.
Sorry.
Still the leading variety, I understand.
Yeah, that is, yeah.
Yeah, and I think our members would be interested to know that South Africa grows slightly more white wine than red wine. I think it's maybe 55% white wine, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, and Sauvignon Blanc is also a very big portion of the white wine plantings. And not to forget Chardonnay, of course. Yeah, so
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's go on to our second wine of the tasting, which is your Pinot Noir Rosé. And I love the story of how this wine came about. So there's a bit of a serendipitous story to the start of this wine. Do you mind sharing that with us, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Pinot Noir wouldn't be your obvious choice for making rosé. You know, I think that, you know, you'd be looking quite possibly at other varietals first. But we were picking, in 2014, we were picking some Pinot Noir for supplying a bio of grapes that we work with. We were picking Pinot Noir for sparkling wine for them. So obviously you want to pick it fairly green. But it was one of those sort of weekend challenges that we have in the wine industry where, you know, things happen on a Friday and then it becomes weekend and everybody sort of, you know, is away for a day or two. And yeah, it's one of those sort of weekend things, you know, where we come back on the Monday and things changed. So the buyer didn't take the whole block. so we had a batch of grapes left. But by the Monday, the grapes had really ripened a bit more, and they weren't quite. They were a little bit overripe for making sparkling. But Lucas, our winemaker, he said, no, but let's bring them in and see what we can do. Perhaps rosé wines, and so that sort of kind of mistake, how can I say, but a misfortune turned out to be really good fortune. And Lucas made the most amazing rosé that first year, and ever since we've actually continued to make rosé, Pinot Noir rosé, and it's a limited release, in that we actually initially those first sort of bottlings were only for selling from the cellar door to our direct online customers at the winery. At that time, we had developed a month-end market on the farm where we had about 60 different exhibitors, stall holders that came along and sold their produce and their crafts. And then we sold, obviously, the Pinot Noir at this market on the farm. So we don't sell it at all into the trade in South Africa to restaurants or hotels or bottle shops or bottle stores. It's really exclusive from the farm. And on our export markets, we also, we've actually got it exclusively for a premium on the export market, which I think is really, really good. It's a really special offering. You're not going to find it anywhere else. You're not going to be able to buy it online somewhere. So it's we don't do a huge volume. The 22 now, actually, we entered it with the Rosé Rocks competition in South Africa, which is our biggest rosé competition, and actually came out tops of all the entries. A double gold medal, and we're very proud of the wine.
Wow, congratulations. Aren't we lucky to have access to this special wine? That's fantastic, Nick. Thank you so much. So I have this, the 2021 in my glass as well, lucky me. And of course you get all that beautiful red fruit, strawberries jump out of the glass, cherries. But the other thing I noticed when I tasted it, there's a nice play between the fruit and a nice salinity, almost like a sea breeze. It really, I find, is picking up a sense of place of your location. So your vineyards are influenced by your proximity to the Atlantic Ocean. And I really felt that I could pick up that salinity, that minerality in this wine.
Louise, you're spot on. Honestly, you hit it right on the nail on the head there. We've definitely got a very significant influence from the cold Atlantic just down the way from us. And in all our wines, we actually have that sort of very unique minerality that you only get on the West Coast, and especially in the Darling district where we are. You just need to dip your toe into the Atlantic down the road and to see how how incredibly cold that water is compared to just on the other side of the Cape Peninsula. You've got the Indian Ocean, which is much warmer. Of course, we get a huge benefit from this cold water mass right up against our property, really. And yes, you do get a certain minerality that runs through, especially the white wines. I just love how this Pinot Noir rosé changes from, sort of strawberry and then to cherry, and it's almost got a bit of I don't know. Did you guys as kids or at the fairgrounds have a thing called candy floss?
Yeah, cotton candy. Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
which is like a stringy big woolly ball of candy. It almost, I pick up those sort of childhood memories in this wine of that candy floss. And yeah, just but I think you know, our wines, the benefit of them really is that, you know, just drinking amazingly on their own, but then put them to food and they just becomes another world. It really livens up a food dish. It yeah, and I mean this with you know, this with you know, once again, lionfish, you know, even a pasta dish, lobster, crayfish, as you know. I mean, Michael giving me the rundown on where your
That's right.
your
Well,
crayfish is your fresh water and the lobster is the sea. Okay, so yeah, but our crayfish are just seawater, seawater and seafood.
yeah.
And but yeah,
And we've got a question here, guys. I think both Louise and Nick, you can both speak to this. Mark's asking about the drinkability on these for the ones we're tasting today are 22 and 23. What happens if he doesn't get them drunk by the end of 23?
Then you have to send them back to us, Mark.
Yeah.
Well, I think when I opened these today, I really felt they were drinking perfectly. Like, it really struck me like this is exactly when they should be enjoyed. I think because these wines are fruit forward and there's such a purity of fruit, you want to enjoy that fruit at its peak, which means drinking them on the young side, right? As all wines get older, they're going to lose that fruity edge. So I think, you know, if you can't find an occasion to drink them this year, if that's the case, I still think they're going to be drinking fine next year. It's going to take some time for that fruit to dissipate. It's just that you want to catch it as early as you can to really maximize the fruit flavor. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, no, I mean, our whites and rosé drink amazingly in their second year. You know, I had at our holiday home where I currently am at the moment, I mean, I had 21s in the fridge and I had 22s I brought with me from the farm, and I was actually just enjoying that 21s, so, you know, that got left behind on our last you know, summer visit. And what a surprise, because, you know, I would, you know, at home we're drinking 22s already, and to come across them and it actually gone a little bit more cherry for me. It's amazing how these wines evolve. It really, I think they can. So what is the gentleman's name who asked the question?
Mark.
Mark.
Mm-hmm.
Mark. Yeah, Mark, I think, you know, the wines are definitely going to evolve a year down the line. The flavor profile should change a little bit, but our whites and rosés are definitely drinking, I think, even better a year down the line.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Mark's also asking about the perfect pairing for pork tenderloin, I think. And I think for me, there's more than one way to go here with this Masters Case and pork tenderloin. So I think the first rule of thumb for me is drink the style of wine that you like. So if you are a white wine drinker, I think that the Chenin has enough body and enough weight to it that it could be paired with pork. Certainly the rosé and the Cinsault, I think you could do any of the three across the board with pork tenderloin. And how about you, Nick? What would be your preference for pairing?
Well, I think, you know, it depends on the chef and depends on what you're up to at home with your pork. I mean, you know, are you putting it into like have you got quite a serious sort of sauce going with it? You know, if you've got a rich sauce, like a cream-based sauce, perhaps, you know, is one stuffing the pork with other, maybe bacon or something? If so, and you've got quite a serious sort of sauce going, I'd definitely lean more towards the Cinsault out of these three wines. But a pork without too much trimmings in that, I think, you know, either the Chenin or the Pinot Noir Rosé could do quite well.
Agreed. It really matters what accompanies the pork, doesn't it? And that's a wonderful transition, I think, into the Cinsault, because when I tasted this wine a couple hours ago, the pairing that jumped into my head was pulled pork. So there's such a lovely, mouth-watering, juicy fruit to the Cinsault. It automatically made me think of like a tangy barbecue sauce that you might have with a pulled pork. So I think it really matters how you prepare the pork as
I'm
to
so
which.
hungry. Stop. You're making me so hungry, Louise.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
I
missed
love,
that, Nick.
love pulled pork. Really amazing.
Yeah, pulled pork. Yeah, that tangy barbecue, whether it's pulled pork or anything on the barbecue, I think would be amazing with this Cinsault. So let's jump into tasting that wine if we can. We've got the 2020 Cinsault here.
You know what's amazing? Can I just go on?
Please.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what's quite amazing, I mean, in South Africa, in the 60s, 1960s, 60s, 70s, Cinsault was the backbone of many blends in South Africa. Many of the old blends that South Africans fell in love with in that period, like your Tassenbergs and your Chateau Libertases and so on. Cinsault was actually the main sort of backbone variety, making up perhaps 50% of the wine. Then the industry sort of swung more towards the noble cultivars, and it became sort of Cab Merlot driven. And a lot of producers pulled out their Cinsault vines because the wineries weren't interested in buying it anymore. But there's been a huge resurgence for Cinsault in South Africa now in the last 3 or 4 years, especially. You know, it makes a divine wine, soft, easy, but it's got a serious edge on its own, but a wonderful blending component. Honestly, it just brings a softness and a juiciness to a Cab or a Merlot or a Shiraz even. Yeah, so definitely in South Africa, there's a comeback with Cinsault at the moment.
Absolutely, a renaissance for Cinsault, and this wine is a good example of why. It is very likable. Again, it's something that I would enjoy before a meal without food, and a wonderful wine for pairing. We talked about pork, maybe it's cedar plank salmon, maybe it's a mushroom risotto, all would be wonderful pairings. The tannins in this wine are moderate, and I find that it makes it, like you said, a very easy drinking, approachable wine. I did want to mention serving temperature, though. I think this is a wine that would be great with a slight chill on it. My house is quite warm. It's about 22 degrees in my house, which is really too warm to be drinking red wine. So this wine in particular, because it's so fresh and so fruit forward, and the tannins are moderate, I think it would do great with a half hour in the fridge before drinking and really allow that vibrant fruit to pop. What do you think?
Louise, I couldn't agree with you more. I do, you know, I've always got an ice bucket going with white wines, so drop it in the ice bucket for 5 minutes. If you want to be really naughty, you can drop a small ice block into the wine. Although I probably should this as a winemaker.
Yeah, no comment, right, Nick?
Yeah, okay, let's not comment too much on that one. But yeah, it's a variety, as I said, it's making a comeback. It's yeah, just drinking really, really well. It's you know, I think the other thing is that, you know, we talked earlier about when you drink the white wines. Our red wines in Darling are actually drinking, I wouldn't say better at a young age, but they are incredibly approachable after 2 years or so. I mean, it's, you know, we got really soft tannins. I think one thing that I must mention, of course, is that we're actually very privileged to have access to these grapes, the Cinsault grapes. They actually come from one of those really old blocks in Darling. not our block, but it's a grapes that we buy in. And the vineyard was planted in 1976.
Oh, wow.
So it's a 45-year-old vineyard. And, you know, we're very privileged actually to have access to those grapes. It's a bush vine vineyard where most of our vineyards, or all our vineyards, are actually trellised, with fairly low productions of about 4 tons a hectare. So, yeah, just great fruit from this farm is situated on really good clay soils, about 5 kilometers from us. Yeah, so we're really fortunate to have access to these grapes.
Wonderful. And it really does speak to a sense of place. I find that there's, again, a nice tension between the fruit. So ripe, you know, strawberry, red currant, plum fruit, and a touch of smokiness or a touch of earthiness, touch of savory, that it gives that point of interest and that balance to this wine, which I find really appealing.
Yeah, it's a soil, Louise, it's a soil. A little bit of savoriness that we get in quite a few of our reds. There's definitely that clay soils, the oak leaf Hudson soils that we have in Darling. Yeah, but just, you know, it's adding wonderful flavor dimension to the wine, just lifting it a bit, and just making it incredibly yummy to drink.
So we've got a couple of questions in the chat. I'm going to do the first one. Don't worry, I'm going to come back to you, Steve and Carol, but Simone is asking how this one would compare to the Old Man's Blend.
Well, maybe we need to ask the old man and get him on the line.
Yes, he's not handy, is he, Nick? No.
No, he's about 100 kilometers. No, he's probably about 50 kilometers away from where we are.
And I would speak to this, but in the presence of the winemaker and 2 MWs, I don't think I will.
Okay. No, you know, the Old Man's Blend is, the blend stays pretty much the same. It's predominantly Cab Merlot, around about 40-45% of each, and Shiraz 15 or so. So the cab plays a pretty big role in that wine. You know, it brings a lot of structure. It brings a bit of mintiness. Cab's cab, you know, it kind of leads the way there. I think this is definitely very different to the Old Man's Blend. I'd say a little bit juicier, slightly more sort of cherry led, red currant, raspberry, so a little bit more berries, where the Old Man is a little bit more structured, a little bit more tannin. Yeah, as I say, you know, Cab Merlot leading the way there, and then obviously with Shiraz as well, it's bringing in a bit of spiciness. So spicy, tannin, little bit of Cab, mintiness. That's sort of more the Old Man.
Yeah, you wouldn't be recommending that one with the pork, right? For sure.
No. I think this would be lovely with pork, to be honest.
This says so for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And so then Steve and Carol were saying that they were getting a bit of effervescence on the tongue with the rosé.
Okay, could be.
Did either of you have that happening? No.
Not in my bottle.
Okay. But I wouldn't suggest that it was a fault, though. And Steve and Carol, if you wanted to write back, if you felt that the wine was still fresh and pleasant as well. And that's maybe we talk a little bit about being under cork and being under screw cap. You get a lot less poor bottles with screw cap. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean it's you know, it's incredible. 20 years ago when we were starting out, there was this huge debate about closures, but you know, I think we've come a long way with screw cap. I think there's been a lot of good technology improvements in screw cap, and you know, even the corks we use these days, we use what we call a Diam cork, which is a composite cork, almost. It's got a familiar, similar appearance to a champagne cork, where you've got tiny pieces of cork that are treated separately and compressed into a single cork. I would say, when we were starting out 20 years ago, we would pretty regularly get cork complaints. But using more screw cap these days and composite corks, it's a revelation.
Game changer.
And keeping wine fresh. And Michael, the big thing about cork taint, is that we're not all sort of we don't all have the knowledge to really pick it up, perhaps sometimes. And there can be a small cork taint on a wine, and you don't know it's corked, but the wine is just not as fresh as it should be. You're not having quite as good a wine experience as what you should be having, and you don't realize it, but it's actually the cork problem. So screw caps are definitely, to me, the way to go. On some of our wines, we use the Stel Lux caps, which are a little bit more upmarket screw caps that are slightly better finishings. But yeah, we very much in favor of screw cap.
Right. Well, and so I find that interesting, and I'm sure the MWs will agree. As you drink more wine, it's easier to pick up taint, and much sooner than others might. And it's one of the disadvantages of getting to know wine to that level. Right. So listen, Nick and Louise, I think we need to move on to the Ramilo today. So thank you so very much for joining us, Nick. You can turn off your torches now and finish your red, and really appreciate your joining us. And Louise, of course, you're welcome to stay, but I understand you've got some things to do as well. So thank you very, very much. And everybody else, please stay on. And we've got Jacky Blisson all ready to talk about the Ramilo wines from another seller. So thanks again, Nick. Have a great night.
Good at you, Michael.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Thank you, Nick.
Hey, thanks, Louise.
Here's Louise.
Thank you.
Hello, Jacky.
Hello, how have you been?
Very well. How are you?
Very well, very well. Hello, everybody. I hope you all had a very nice Christmas break. It's nice to be back tasting some wine together.
I have to agree. I've missed it over the holidays. Although I did drink some wine over the holidays, I will admit.
Did you drink any Portuguese wine?
I did not. No.
I just think Portuguese wine is so versatile and fantastic value. I think a lot of people got stuck into the idea of equating Portugal with port and haven't really explored the wealth of interesting table wines, white and red, that there are from Portugal, and really from all over the country, north to south, coastal to inland, mountainous terrain. There's just a ton to discover. So Ramilo.
Yes, and can I mention something about the program, Jacky?
Sure,
before we get started with Ramilo? This is my wonderful piece that I got in the case for the Ramilo. Yep. They printed it on very, very stiff stock, and then they put it in the top. And it's gotten crunched quite badly. And what we're finding is that the producers around the world, everybody's on a different size of paper, and they don't understand. So we've made the decision to send PDFs out to all of you members that are on the Masters Case program, rather than have one in the case. It also reduces the cost for the producer, so they put more into the wine. They're able to do that, and it helps with the cost of glass having gone up 140% as well. So
better for the planet to be printing less paper.
Exactly right, and in fact, I think it's a better experience. This one was the worst example of them, but I mean, I can still read it and everything, but it really was. So I just want to let everybody know, as they start coming in now this year. There won't be a pamphlet in it, because we'll be sending it to you directly by email. So, okay, so we're off to the races, Jacky. It's nice to see you, as I said. And we've got 3 wines to taste today. And we've done a TMC together as well. So wanting to compare and contrast the styles of the wine, and I can tell you already love Portuguese wine.
I do. I really am a
Yes.
huge fan. And I really love this story because I think what's really fun for people, obviously, taste the wine, learn a little bit about how the wines are made, what you would pair with it. But to really fall in love with a wine, it's always great to hear about the story. And this family story really is fun. I mean, this is a fourth generation winemaking family established in the 1930s, 1937. And after a period making wines from their own vineyards and really concentrating on that, the family decided to start buying in a lot more grapes and focusing more on selling bottled wine and the marketing and the sales side of things than necessarily the vineyards. And this current generation, Pedro and Nuno, when they were asked by their father to come into the family business and take over, I think it was in 2013, they said, okay, but we want to go back to the vineyards. That's the heart of making wine. We want to really dig into our vineyards and express through our wines what makes them so different. I'm not saying the previous generations didn't. I'm saying that they wanted to have, instead of a focus that was as much vineyard as it was selling, marketing, buying in grapes and expanding their reach, they wanted to go back to the beginning, back to the heart of winemaking, which is the vines. And so they really, and they have a really, really interesting terroir that you don't hear about so much. You know, when we start hearing about table wine in Portugal, we think about the Douro, we think about Vinho Verde in the north, we think about the northern areas, the central areas, Alentejo is big as well, but around Lisbon in the south, Lisboa, this area, there is quite a strong, long tradition of winemaking, but isn't outside of Portugal, wasn't so well known. And they are actually in an area called the Lisandro Valley, which is northwest of Lisbon, not too far from the coast. So you get a lot of coastal influence, which is really important for the wines here. You're getting the cool breezes coming in from the Atlantic. Quite rocky terrain, so very well drained soils. That's important because it really sends the vine roots deep, deep, deep down to look for nutrients, controls vigor in the vine, so you have slightly lower yields, more concentrated flavors in these grapes. And you've got sort of a valley, obviously, so you've got mountains on either side. We have the Sintra and the Mafra mountains on either side. And in this valley, you've got overnight, because of the Atlantic, you've got a lot of cool breezes, damp, cool breezes coming in that really cool down this, you know, hot southern Portuguese climate. Is quite hot Mediterranean, but very cool overnight and stays cool in the early morning. And then that fog lifts off in the midday, and the afternoon is really, really warm. So this diurnal variation, this difference between very cool nights and warm afternoons, allows the grapes to ripen really, really fully, but slowly. And it allows for a really long growing season. And a long, slow growing season is fantastic because it allows a lot more of the aromatic components, which are found in the skins, the flavor components, the tannin, the phenolics, they call it, all of these components that are found in the skins really have the time to fully ripen, and the sugar will accumulate in the grapes slowly over time, and the acidity will drop more slowly. So you end up with this beautiful balance of bright, fresh acidity, beautiful ripeness, because we are, as I said, in a hot southern Portuguese climate, and really complex flavors developing here, which is, you know, really interesting terroir that you don't necessarily hear about that well. So the Lisandro Valley and also the Colares, which is another neighboring terroir, even slightly closer to the Atlantic, so even slightly cooler here. So really, I think a really interesting family story, commitment to their terroir, and such an interesting terroir. Have any of the members been to Portugal or down and, you know, tested any of the wines that are in and around Lisbon?
Yeah, please type that into the chat because it's very interesting. I know that a couple of our staff members have been to Portugal in the last year. So Joao, and so we have a Joao and a Joel, and they're both Portuguese, and they've both been home this past year. So that's been really neat. And Sandra Walsh is saying she's hoping to get there this year. Oh, I don't know if you heard that, but I've opened the white, and I'm sure it's going to be very different than the Chenin Blanc we just tried from
very
South
different.
Africa, right? So
Yeah, very, very.
and you're definitely going to have to help us, Jacky, with the varietals here. It's
Yes.
just they're certainly unusual, aren't they?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that makes Portuguese wine stand apart, is these native varieties, this pretty much almost exclusive focus on indigenous grape varieties, indigenous to Portugal or indigenous to the Iberian Peninsula. Some are also grown in Spain. Jocelyn loves a Portuguese wine. I hope that we will get there. It says, unfortunately, overshadows other areas. Yeah, you know, the Douro does make beautiful wines, Jean-Paul, but there are fantastic wines being made all over. And I think, depending on where you live, we're starting to see in wine stores, and obviously through Opinion's offerings especially, we're starting to see wines from other parts of Portugal's coming through. Obviously, the Douro is what everybody had in mind earlier because of port, but we're starting to see more wines, Alentejo, exactly, fantastic wines coming from there as well. So these wines, if we start, for example, with the white, talking about grape varieties, are made from 3 grapes that are very common to throughout Portugal, but especially the north. We're looking at the Colheita Branco, colheita meaning crop or harvest. And so this just basically refers to the fact that it's a single vintage wine. We're looking at the 2020 for the white. And it's made of 3 different varieties. So the first one is Arinto, which in certain parts of Portugal is also called Paderna. And this is a very widespread grape. It's grown throughout Portugal, and it's really prized in blends because it is a grape that really holds on to, it's got naturally high acidity, and even in very hot climates, it manages to hold on to this high nervy acidity. So when you've got other grapes that are lower in acidity, that are going to be riper and fuller, the Arinto will give you that nervy backbone, that crisp quality that gives a lot of balance to the wine, gives a lovely citrus element too, quite mineral. And then you've got Viosinho, which is a grape that we see a lot in northern Portugal, especially in the Douro. Very floral, a lot of stone fruit, still quite bright in its acidity and great structure. This can sort of give you a bit of a backbone to the wine to go along with Arinto's more lighter, more crisp mineral character. And then finally, the third grape, Alvarinho, is the same grape as Albarino that you might know from Galicia in Spain, from Rías Baixas, for example. And Albarino is a major grape in the Vinho Verde area in northern Portugal, but is starting to crop up in different areas and is really considered a very high quality grape. Beautiful, vibrant acidity, very fragrant in a sort of a lemony peach kind of a way. Lovely salinity often on the finish, especially when it's grown close to the coast. Very elegant overall. When it's grown inland, it's much richer, more structured. When it's grown closer to the coast, it's slightly lighter and more nervy. So those 3 grapes, and blending is common in Portugal. You tend to find that we're seeing some single varietal bottles coming through, but historically, table wines in Portugal, white and red, did tend to be blends. And this is really the case in the 3 wines that we've got here in front of us today. So if you haven't opened your white, I'd say, Michael, this is a great time to do it.
I have done.
I have done. Here we are.
Yes,
We've got our
that's
white
right.
in front of us.
And I'm finding there's kind of like a roundness to the mouthfeel, which surprised me. And that is the middle one. I'm not going to try to pronounce it, but the one that starts with a V is giving it that mouthfeel.
The Viosinho, yeah.
Yes,
Viosinho.
is that right?
Yeah, and I'm probably butchering all the names too. I think you need to be a native Portuguese speaker to really pronounce them in a beautiful way. But yeah, the roundness is quite surprising because on the nose, you're getting this sort of limey, lemony, mineral kind of a character, a little bit quite restrained in the way that, you know, old world wines tend to be as compared to their new world counterparts. But then, yeah, and you've got a lovely nervy acidity, but then you do have a lovely roundness coming through on the mid palate, which is really, really nice because it sort of gives it another dimension, gives it a bit more complexity. Obviously very dry wine, but you know, the fruit comes through a lot on the palate, I find, especially as it warms up.
Yeah, I found it counters that acidity really nicely, so that it gives it that much more balance, right? So,
Mhm.
yeah, very, very nice. I mean, that's the whole idea about blending, isn't it? Is to balance the
Absolutely.
wine to make it so much more pleasant to drink.
Absolutely. It's just like, I often compare it for people with cooking,
Mhm.
you're starting with looking at ingredients that will complement each other and enhance each other to make a more pleasing, harmonious whole. And that is definitely, for me, the case of what's going on here. And these are wines, I think, that are so lovely because they drink really well on their own. They've got all that crisp freshness that is so pleasing in a wine that you're just sipping, as you're preparing supper or, serving as an aperitif with your friends. But as you say, that roundness, that slightly richer mouthfeel to it also allows it to pair really well. And I think that I think they said a Greek salad in the.
Yeah, that was our
I
food
think
writer
that's a good.
wrote Greek salad, and I think it's kind of interesting. I like to call these out, that some members have said that the food pairings have been a bit too esoteric in the catalogs, but
Oh, the third wine
okay.
definitely has a very
Yes.
specific pairing with the cheese.
Yeah,
I was gonna
right.
mention that a little later on.
No, for sure, but yeah, with a Greek salad, I think in fact with
Trout.
almost any salad, right? With the,
Yeah,
the
Marc
acidity
Andre is
on
saying
there.
that he had it last night with trout. Trout's perfect. I was going to say grilled
Ah,
fish.
right.
This works really well, and that's very typical, obviously, to Portugal, especially in the coastal areas. We do see a lot of fish. Obviously, cod bacalhau is very common dish in Portugal, but grilled fish, smoked fish, salted fish, you see a lot of dishes like that in Portugal to go with the whites. So any light sort of fish, you wouldn't want to go with something with too creamy or heavy of a sauce. You'd want to stick to, really let quite a pure light flavor from the fish, but would work really, really well with that. And it's got enough acidity and nerviness that you could do with all kinds of briny, oysters or mussels or things along those lines could work really well with this as well. So.
Yeah, and I have to say it doesn't affect the taste, but the fact that it's the label's printed directly to the bottle on the glass, it's rare now, right? It's kind of refreshing. I really enjoyed getting the bottle that way.
It's really elegant, I find.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think it's the sort of wine, if you bring it over to somebody's house for supper, it's a really beautiful bottle.
Yeah,
looks very elegant, looks very chic. Was anybody surprised by this? Were the sort of flavors they were expecting? Because sometimes you read the tasting note and then you taste the wine yourself and you think, that's not exactly how I pictured it. Because obviously everybody's taste buds, tasting is such a personal thing, and we're all going to come out with, we all have different tastes that we perceive or aromas that we perceive more strongly than other people. Lime, I think lime wet stone, the way it was described is quite apt. And then, as you say, there's a nerviness, but rounder, fuller on the palate.
Jean-Paul,
a bit bigger than he was expecting, the roundness, the complexity. And that's definitely not only the Viocino, but the Alvarinho as well. Because again, as I said, we're close to the coast, but we are in southern Portugal. It's a hot Mediterranean climate. So you've got the coastal influences, the cooling effects overnight, but in the afternoon, it is warm. So you're getting quite ripe fruit character, and that's coming through in that roundness and that ample character.
And you see Kim Chen drank hers while she was camping, which
it was a great place to drink wine, sitting by the lake, contemplating life.
That's great. So which of the reds were you planning to do first, Jacky?
I was thinking of the Valle Lisandro, the Aragonés blend.
Right.
I think that would be a good starting place here. And so getting back into the native grape varieties. So Aragonés is how I believe that you pronounce it. Tinto Roriz is what it's called in the Douro. It's a synonym for the grape. And in Spain, any guesses? Anybody want to type in the chat, guess what Tinto Roriz is called in Spain? Drum roll, anybody? Somebody brave?
Not me.
Tempranillo. Kim,
hey, she's disqualified.
Cheater. Tempranillo. So this is the same grape as Tempranillo, which is obviously the major red grape in Rioja, in Ribera del Duero. It is the most planted red grape in the Iberian Peninsula, in Portugal and in Spain. It's in Portugal. You find it a lot in the Douro in red blends, table wines and port, and in Alentejo as a blended wine, sometimes varietal, but more in blends. And so here it's interesting because you're getting, like in Alentejo, like in the Douro, as I said, you have these warm afternoons, so you're getting the warm fruit, the ripeness, but this lovely coastal influence. So you have a really, really nice balance of freshness here. So Tempranillo Aragonés, as we pronounce it here, tends to give you a lovely fragrance as a grape. It has a lot of red and black berry, sort of cherry notes, can be quite dense and powerful on the palate, but especially when it's ripened fully, it tends to have quite a velvety tannin. And when you pair it with the second grape here, Touriga Nacional, which is a really highly prized grape variety in Portugal, considered to be very elegant. Again, a grape that you see a lot in port and in Douro wines, as well as, and starting to see more and more in different parts of the country. Again, very elegant, very structured, a lot of dark fruit notes, sort of plum, cassis sort of notes, but also very floral, a lot of violet notes. So really, really pretty. That's what lends it the sort of elegance, gives it a slightly softer note, because it is on the palate very firm. In its youth can have very robust tannin. So it's got this interesting dichotomy of being pretty and floral on the nose, but then a serious powerhouse on the palate. And so when you pair it with this Aragonés, this Tempranillo, that it has a lot of bright berry fruit and is a bit rounder and more velvety on the palate, it gives it that flesh. It's almost the same sort of way in Bordeaux, for example. Merlot can bring a fleshiness, a softness to Cabernet Sauvignon, which is a more powerful grapes. This is sort of what's going on here between the Touriga Nacional and the Aragonés. So this is a wine that's got tons of dark fruit on the nose, but then you also get those red fruit notes coming through on the palate, which is really cool.
Cherry bomb.
Yeah. Really nice, really fresh.
Yeah.
And again, as I said, hot climate in the afternoons, but there's a lovely freshness here, which gives it such nice balance.
So, and that's something that I'd like to talk about a bit, is that, and we all know that Jane had very short drinking windows. She liked drinking young wines. So she has 21 to 23 for this wine. But from my perspective, I think it's still got a ton of acidity and fruitiness that it'll go much longer than that, right? And it'll also settle down a bit, won't it?
Drinking windows are so personal. I mean, I talk about this with Louise a lot when we're tasting together. And she also loves her wines young and fruity, and says, oh, I put longer drinking windows, but I like to drink things young. I think she was talking about that just now with the Groote Post wines. Whereas I love earthy, tertiary, sort of leathery, smoky kind of aromas that can develop over time. I don't want to lose the fruit in a wine like this that has such pretty fruit, but I love when you start to get those subtle sort of undertones that can come with age. And so, I think personally, I think this can easily go 4 or 5 years.
Yeah,
it does change. It will change. And people who like their wines really pure and juicy and fruity should definitely drink it on the younger side of the spectrum. But
that's the beauty of wine, isn't it?
Exactly.
Drink it when you want.
Exactly. And they're the kind of wines that you can definitely chill a little bit, not for too long. Maybe put it in the fridge 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Or, if you have it in your fridge, take it out an hour before serving, something like that. Bring it up to about, 16, 17 degrees, 17, 18 degrees. Not that you need to get out a thermometer and start checking. Right. Well, this is all just approximative, but
yeah. And you bring up a pet peeve of mine. Don't you find that most restaurants serve their reds far too warm?
Oh yeah, and if you'd ask them I've asked to chill, give me an ice bucket for a red wine, they look at you.
Yeah,
completely shocked, and
say if you
and I only want to put it in for 5-10
right.
minutes. That's all. I just want to give it a little, because the thing about it is, if you serve a red wine too warm, we always talk about room temperature, but room temperature 30 years ago is not the same as room temperature most people are heating their homes to, 21, 22 degrees. That's too warm for a red wine. You're going to get the alcohol will feel a bit warmer and more spirity. The flavors are more subdued. It just feels more heavy. Whereas if you just give it a little chill, not too much, you don't want to mute the flavors either, just a little chill, just really makes the aromas and the flavors just pop a bit brighter. Definitely be the case here. Here they suggest vegetable stew. Again, I think this is the kind of wine that definitely, that bright fruit. It's only medium in body. It wouldn't overpower a vegetable-based dish, but I think you would still, there is a certain heartiness. So I would definitely go for heartier vegetables in a vegetable stew, root vegetables, things like eggplant or would be good as well. Sweet potato, things like that.
I recently did a vegetable chili very recently that had lots of flavor and everything. I think that would have paired very nicely with this.
Yeah, you don't want to go for a chili to be too spicy though.
No, and
Just
I always
mild
keep it
spice.
on the low end. I let people
mild
add their
spice
own
is perfect.
spice to my chilies, right? So because you can't take it out, right?
Yeah,
So
well, that's
if you
the
put
thing.
it at the lower end, we have some hot sauce. You add your hot sauce.
Yeah. I make I have a French husband and they tend to not like things too spicy. So I make it less spicy than I would like. But if I go for a really spicy dish, then I would change up the wine pairing, go for something that can handle the spice. Here, I would say definitely keep your flavors mild, on the milder side. But yeah, I think vegetable stew, vegetarian chili, things like that would be great with a wine like this.
Oh, great. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
One more to go.
Yeah, one more. This is a lovely wine too. So we were talking about Colheita earlier. So pretend the H is the Y when you're pronouncing it, Colheita. And again, as I said, it means crop or harvest. So it just really refers to the fact that this is a single vintage wine. That might seem odd to some people. They might think, well, most wine are single vintage wines. But obviously in Portugal, this is a land that for many had a long history of making port, and there's the entire division of port, tawny ports, which are made to a blended standard of several vintages, a 10-year style, a 20-year style, a 30-year style. It's not specifically one vintage. So when we're getting into table wines, obviously we are generally talking more about vintage wines. So here the idea is not only this is a vintage wine, just a vintage wine from a specific place, and it's an expression of what the vintage was all about. And 2019 was a lovely vintage, warm, but with enough sort of cooling influences in the spring and in the fall to really allow for a long, not excessively hot or excessively cold growing season. It was just really balanced in terms of enough heat to give a right powerful nature to the wines, but with rains at the right times and cooling influences at the right times to give a long, balanced growing season. So 2019 is really nice. And so here we have another blend, of course, and the two grapes that we were just speaking about, but here we also have Castelao. So Castelao is mainly found in the south of Portugal, in the coastal region, so right where we are here. Can be slightly rustic, very, earthy type notes, wild berry type notes, can be quite robust on the palate, but it really likes, one of the reasons it likes the south coastal region of Portugal is because it really thrives on sandy soils. So here the soils are quite rocky, but sandy as well in certain patches. And in sandier areas, Castelao can take on a lot more elegance, a lot more silkiness on the palate than it generally would have. So it really is well suited to this terroir. So we have this Castelao that's typically a little bit more rustic, hardy, wild berry, robust. We have this Aragonês that I was talking about with this plump, rounded nature, this bright berry fruit, but still quite dense. And then Trigo Nacional, lovely floral, elegant nose, and then a little bit firmer on the palate. So each of these blending components bringing something really interesting to the whole. And you definitely, on this wine, are getting all those really pretty black fruits, the blackberries, even some blue tones as well, blueberries, things like that I think are really pretty.
I have a nose for blueberry, and I've got it on there. I don't think everybody will get it, but there's certain things that each of us have.
Yeah.
That
Growing up in Quebec, wild blueberries are a big thing here, so I always pick up blueberries. I'm also getting a little bit of licorice, a hint of spice, things like that are really pretty on the nose. And then again, you've got medium plus maybe body, and the tannins a little bit firm in their youth, but then with time they really soften quite nicely.
I'm really liking this wine.
I find there's an expansive quality on the palate. It starts off somewhat firm and then really broadens as you leave it, some time to play across the palate, which I really like. And I think you were talking earlier about how some of these food pairings can be a little bit esoteric. We've had this comment before. And definitely a São Jorge cheese isn't something that maybe we're all coming across in our local cheese shops, but it is a great cheese if you've ever had a chance to try it.
Have done, and I was going to say to people, if you have not tried that pairing, this is the time to try it, because you've got the wine. Go find the cheese. Absolutely. Yeah.
If you can find it, it's nice. It's a semi-firm cheese, a bit waxy, little small holes in it. So it's sort of a creamy, buttery flavor. And then it's quite mild overall, but then it's got almost sort of a very slightly spiced or peppery aftertaste to it, which really the juxtaposition between the sort of buttery creaminess and the mildness, and then this pepperiness in the aftertaste is really nice. So if you were to recommend a cheese alternative,
or not even a cheese alternative, a pairing alternative, that or yeah, perhaps another cheese. Wow. I'm leaving that one to you.
I'm having a think about what we could find here in the semi-firm kind of
We're really lucky to have some gourmet shops here in Kitchener-Waterloo where I'm able to get cheeses like that. There's one called Vincenzo's where they have literally 300-400 cheeses to choose from. It's fantastic. But
I'm trying to think what would work well with there. I mean, I think even some harder cheeses would be nice with that. You know, the Gouda, a nice Gouda, not necessarily a smoked one, but just a mild one could work really well. Think about that. Oh, Danish blue. Why not? Yeah, that could be very nice. Absolutely. I love blue cheese pairings with red wine. Yeah. I honestly tend to pair my cheeses more personally with white wine, but I do like blue cheese with red. I do think that is a lovely pairing. So I think that would work really well. What else would pair?
And I think the acidity on this would really pair nicely with that, wouldn't it? It would hold up to that cheese very nicely.
Absolutely, it would hold up, and also the creamy aspect of a Danish blue with the acidity. The acidity would cut through, you know, the heaviness of the creamy, the sort of the richness, and that would be a really nice juxtaposition. You could also do, you know, if you want to go with something more classic, this is, you know, the kind of wine that medium plus, it would go really well with all manners of, you know, from pork to veal to red meat dishes. Again, not too heavy on the spice, but stew, you know, hunter stew type dishes would go really well with this. I think it's a pretty versatile red for wine.
It is. It's kind of that mid-range, isn't it? Where it's not going to overpower too many things, it can hold up to other things.
Absolutely. I mean, you could pair this with the spaghetti bolognese, and it would be. It would be excellent.
Well, Louise was making Nick hungry. Now you're making me hungry.
Just a couple hours till dinner.
Yeah.
Portuguese olives. Yeah, why not? Absolutely.
And the salinity would just, wouldn't that be? Yeah. That would really.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think either one of these wines, actually, I was thinking more the first wine, I forgot to mention it, but either one, they would also go really, really well with a charcuterie board. You know, if you were just serving a bunch of cured salamis and things like that, and prosciuttos and meats like that, some hard cheeses, just a board with olives, exactly, things like that. These ones.
Yeah, you know, about an hour before I came here, I was at Vincenzo's to get literally a charcuterie board for tomorrow.
There you go.
So here we are.
We should dig into it with a sip of this wine.
In German, we call it Faspa. It's cold cuts and cheeses and different breads, and we're going to have that after church tomorrow. And I'll I've got one more unopened bottle of this. So
perfect.
That's right.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that will work really, really well. I think I just love these wines have, they're versatile, they're easy to love, easy to drink, but they're distinctive. You know, they're not they couldn't be from anywhere. They're Portuguese. No. They have that lovely earthiness, a restraint. We're making Marc-André hungry with all our food talk. Me hungry too. But yeah, they have a certain restraint and earthiness. There's almost a slightly chalky quality to the tannin you get in Portuguese red wines, and that lovely nerviness you get in the white wines that really makes them distinctive, really makes them unique, but also crowd pleasers at the same time. And I think just fantastic value for money, for the quality on offer.
that certainly was what I was thinking. Well, that's great. If anybody has any other last minute questions, I think we'll wrap this up. We usually try to have this with an hour, but because we did 2, we went to an hour and a half. So thanks everybody for your interest and your engagement. We really appreciate it. And I do think that this is a brilliant part of the Masters Case program, is to be able to talk. I mean, there are just over 400 of you Masters of Wine in the world, and we have 2 of them on the call, which is quite a remarkable thing. And it really is something that makes Opinion unique, not just in Canada, but I think in the world. I think that I think it's a really remarkable club. As you know, I'm maybe a slightly biased. I'm not sure.
Not even biased.
But yeah, that's right. But nonetheless, thank you so much. It's always a delight to do these with both you and Louise, and having Nick on. We couldn't have Ramilo on because they don't speak English. So we tried that once. Remember Kim Chen? We tried it with some Spanish producers, and it didn't go that particularly well.
Actually, Ramilo couldn't make
Yeah.
it. He speaks
Yeah.
English, Michael,
Oh, okay.
Ah.
but he couldn't
okay.
make it.
No, that's
Next
stupid,
time.
but and we try every time, just so you know, everybody who's in the program, we try to have an MW and the winemaker on with us, and it doesn't always work out, but in the majority of times it will. And you know, it wasn't the original thought, and then we had Beck Hardy join us in one of the original ones, and it just went so well, and it was so engaging that we try to do it every time now. So
Well, there's nothing better than hearing from the winemaker, you know, from the estate owner, because nobody can explain their terroir, their, you know, the reasons why they made the wine the way they did than the person who made it.
No, that's right. So, and Jacky, Gary and Crystal are asking, a winery in Kelowna we're boasting a Portuguese style. What would they mean by that? And I think it's easier just to say, just think about these 3 wines we just had, right? But,
Yeah, that would be the easy way out. For sure. Well, you know, I think I can't speak for them. I'm not exactly sure what they meant, but for me, I would assume they meant what we were talking about earlier, a certain restraint, you know, the beautiful fruity or floral aromas, but not overpowering, not in your face. There's a sense of elegance and restraint. There's a slight rusticity on the palate, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean there's a textural element, almost sort of a chalkiness or a powderiness to the texture, which is really interesting. An overall sort of earthy, savory quality mixing with the fruit or with the floral or with the citrus sort of notes that gives a lovely complexity overall.
No, that's great. Well, thanks again, Jacky. Really appreciate it, and nice to see you.
Absolute
Thank you,
pleasure.
Kim
Nice to
Chen.
thank you to everybody from Opinion. Thank you
Yeah.
all the members for tuning in today.
Yeah, thank you all the members, and Kim Chen for running the board, and Louise, it looks like you might still be with us. Thank you very much for your part in this. And we'll see you all as the next one on the 18th, Kim Chen, I think. And Michael Pauly will be out joining us. And in fact, I think Michael and I are going to be in Montreal at the office, and we'll do it together from there. So that'll be unique as well. So
Cool.
That's marvelous. Well, thanks again, everybody. Have a great afternoon and evening, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Bye, everybody.
Cheers.
Oh, absolutely. Cheers.
Bye.